Today's lesson is on rational numbers, and it's gonna be fun. Alright, so starting out the lesson on rational numbers, well, we have to know what a rational number is. I definitely want you to write this definition down. A rational number is any number that can be written in the form of a fraction. Or in other words, can be written in the form a over b, in which like a and b are integers. So an example would be any fraction, let's say 3/4. That is a rational number. 1.5. It's still a fraction. Even the number 2, well, 2's an integer, but can we write 2 as a fraction? We could write it as 2 over 1. Or maybe we have the decimal 0.25. It's not a fraction, but you can write it as the fraction 1/4. So there's lots of different numbers that can be written in the form of a fraction. So obviously, all fractions are written in the form of a fraction. All integers can be written in the form of a fraction. And then there's certain types of decimals that can be written as a fraction. There are certain types of decimals that there's no way to write them as a fraction. So if we look below, if you're looking at a decimal, to decide if it can be written as a fraction has to have one of these two characteristics. So the first one would be a repeating decimal. So let's say you have 0.333 and the 3's are just repeating over and over again. If you have that repeating symbol, that guarantees you can write it as a fraction. This is the fraction 1/3. Another example, 0.18181818, and that would be repeating infinitely. That can be written as a fraction, and that's the fraction 2/11. All repeating decimals can be written as a fraction. The other type of decimal that can always be written as a fraction is a terminating decimal. Terminating means the decimal stops at some point. So if you have 0.12, so there's only 2 decimal places, it stops. Because it stops, it can be written as a fraction. In this case, it's the fraction 3/25. Or let's see, 2.123. If that decimal stops at any point, it can always be written as a fraction. So all repeating decimals can be fractions. Therefore, all repeating decimals are rational. And then if the decimal stops at any point, it can also be written as a fraction. This next diagram, you will see a lot throughout this unit. It kind of helps us explain similarities and difference between integers and rational numbers. So if you look here, I've got this big circle that would represent all rational numbers. And then I have a smaller circle of integers that falls within rational numbers. So what do we think that is going to mean? What it means is that all integers, for example, 2. Can 2 be written as a fraction? It sure can, 2 over 1. What about the integer -3? That can be written as a fraction. We could even write it as -6 divided by 2. So because every integer can be written as a fraction, all integers are rational. But what if we have examples like 1/2? 1/2 is out here. It's a rational number, but it's not an integer. 3/4, 0.56 are all rational numbers that are not integers, but all integers are rational. So let's write that out. So I want you to write this down. It says all integers are rational because all integers can be written as fractions. But it doesn't go both ways. Not all rationals are integers because decimals are not whole numbers. So I definitely want you to write those phrases down. Understand the difference between a rational number and an integer. All right, and now for the last part of this lesson, because it's all about rational numbers, numbers that can be written as a fraction, we're going to practice turning decimals into fractions. And to do that, if you can see this chart over here, this will help us because it's looking at place values. And to be honest, we're only going to really look at the place values to the right of the decimal: tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Those are the three most important ones for today's lesson. Alright, so for the first example, we are going to convert the decimal 0.4 to a fraction. Now if you look up here, it's one decimal place, which is the tenths. So this decimal is 4 tenths. Well, you can write that as 4 over 10. All fractions always have to be simplified, so because they're both even numbers, if we cut them in half, it simplifies to 2/5. Woohoo! Alright, the next one, however, is 2 decimal places. So if you look up here, 2 decimal places, that second decimal place is 100ths. So you would say this number as 24 hundredths. So to write it as a fraction, we have to write it as 24 over 100. But we always have to simplify. It starts out, well, nice and easy. It's all even numbers, so let's just cut it in half. We could cut them both in half. That's going to go down to 12 out of 50. They're still both even. Let's cut them in half again. That would be 6 out of 25. And that is fully simplified. So that decimal 0.24 is the fraction 6 out of 25. Alright, 2 more examples. These ones have numbers in front of that decimal, and all that means is we will have a mixed fraction. So the 3 out in front, so a mixed number will have a 3 out in front, and then the fraction left over. All right, 0.05, tenths, hundredths, so 5 hundredths, 5 out of 100. We have to simplify that fraction. Let's see, well, 5's not even, so we can't cut in half, but we can divide them both by 5. So the 3 out in front stays with us. If we divide the top by 5, we'll get 1. And if we, whoopsies, didn't want an equal sign. So 3, and then divide the top by 5, we get 1. Divide the bottom by 5, we get 20. So 3 and 1 over 20. Alright, the fourth example, it's negative, but that just means that our answer will be negative. Because we have the 2 in front of the decimal, we will have a mixed number. So -2 and a fraction. 1 decimal place is tenth, so that is 8 tenths. And then we need to simplify. So -2, we could cut them both in half, 4/5. -2 and 4/5. Alright, let's do this one together. And then I kind of want to have you try the last one on your own. So for this one, we have 3 decimal places. So that third decimal place, we have tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So it's creating a fraction over 1,000. This would be, so 123 thousandths. And now we have to simplify. So what number can we divide both of these by? Turns out, nothing. This is fully simplified. 123 over 1,000. And for this last example, let's do 4.12. 2. 4 and 12 hundredths, pause the video, try it on your own, and then come back and check your answer. You should have simplified it all the way to the fraction 4 and 3/25. So there's your full lesson on rational numbers. What is a rational number? What kind of decimals make a rational number? What's the relationship between integers and rational numbers? And how do you convert decimals to fractions? Good luck with the lesson.